When I discovered our HOA president had hired a fake police force with K-9 units to terrorize residents, I knew I had to act fast before someone got hurt. But I never expected my dad, Chief Christopher, to uncover a web of corruption that would shake our entire community to its core. What would you do if the people claiming to protect your neighborhood were actually criminals with badges? Welcome to my channel. Comment below where you're watching from. The bright orange paper fluttering on my front door stopped me cold. After a 12-hour hospital shift, all I wanted was to surprise Laura by helping with her new vegetable garden. But that notice changed everything. My hands trembled as I read the bold black header. Immediate action required. I'd heard whispers about Karen Matthew, our newly elected HOA president. She moved in just 6 months ago, and somehow got herself elected within weeks. The way she wrote our address on the notice, pressing so hard the ink nearly tore through the page, told me everything I needed to know about her personality. Unapproved landscaping modifications detected in backyard space. Immediate removal required. All garden installations must undergo proper HOA review process. At the bottom, Karen's signature sprawled across the page like a royal decree. But it was the final line that made my stomach twist. Security will conduct regular inspections to ensure compliance. Since when did our quiet suburban street need security inspections for a vegetable garden? Laura and I had moved in 3 months ago, drawn by friendly neighbors and peaceful streets. Mrs. Patterson next door even baked us cookies. And now this? I took photos of both sides of the notice. Something about the wording felt off, like it was trying too hard to sound official. I remembered my dad's advice: always document everything. Being the son of a police chief teaches you things about real and fake authority. Inside, Laura was humming in the kitchen, soil still under her fingernails. Her smile faded when I handed her the notice. But we checked the HOA guidelines, she said, already pulling up the site on her tablet. Right here, Article 7. Vegetable gardens permitted in backyard spaces with proper drainage. Her environmental lawyer instincts kicked in. We'd done everything right. Proper drainage, raised beds, tomatoes barely visible from outside the yard. Then the doorbell rang. We jumped. Through the peephole, I saw Karen herself tapping her foot on our welcome mat. She wore a crisp white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. A tablet clutched like a weapon. "I want to make sure you received my notice," she said, skipping any kind of greeting. Her eyes darted past me, trying to peek inside. "The board has received complaints about your agricultural activities." "Would you mind showing me those complaints?" I asked, staying calm like Dad taught me. "And which specific guidelines are we violating?" Her smile dropped. "Our new security team will begin documenting all violations tomorrow. I suggest you comply quickly." She turned and marched off, but not before I noticed a logo on her tablet case that looked an awful lot like a police badge. As I closed the door, Laura was already on her laptop. "Look at this," she whispered. "Last month's board meeting minutes. They never voted to hire a security team. Where is she getting this authority?" I looked out the window at the neat rows of vegetables Laura had lovingly planted. Something bigger was going on. That orange notice was just the beginning. I picked up my phone to call Dad, then paused. Maybe it was too soon. The next morning, sipping my coffee, I spotted them. 2 men in black polo shirts with HOA security printed on the back were photographing our garden. Their movements were stiff, aggressive, and the tactical belts they wore, loaded with what looked like real police gear. Laura was still upstairs. I stepped onto the back porch. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller one turned. His hand rested on what looked like a police-issue taser. The other kept taking photos like our tomato plants were part of a crime scene. "We have police authority within this community," the tall one said, flashing a badge, too quickly for me to read. "We're documenting ongoing violations under HOA Code 47B. He spoke like someone used to not being questioned. I pulled out my phone and started recording. They visibly stiffened. "I'd like to see your credentials and documentation of that authority," I said. The shorter one stepped forward, but the tall one stopped him. Then, right on cue, Karen appeared. She strutted across the lawn in designer workout gear, waving another orange violation notice. "These officers don't answer to residents," she said, practically beaming. They report directly to the HOA Executive Board. That means they report to me. I caught Mrs. Patel peeking through her curtain. Her face said everything. Fear. Later that morning, I reviewed my footage. The badges? No names. Wrong design. The gear? It looked real, but the placement was all wrong. During lunch break, I dove into state security laws. Every real company needed licenses, especially when armed. But Karen's newsletter only mentioned enhanced security. No company name, no license numbers, nothing I could verify. Laura came downstairs just as I was drafting an email to the state licensing board. "Why are men with guns taking pictures of our garden?" she asked, clearly rattled. I showed her the footage. Her face drained of color. "Those aren't security guards," she said. "I used to work for a security company. Their gear is all wrong." We looked out the window as they moved to another house. The David families, the same family that recently complained about noise regulations being enforced unfairly. They spent extra time there, just like they had outside the Smiths, who questioned the recent security fees. That night I created a private chat with trusted neighbors. Stories poured in. The security team had entered backyards, taken photos of kids, threatened a man for washing his car in his driveway. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Karen. "Your surveillance of HOA security is a violation. Expect enforcement tomorrow." She'd just confirmed our suspicions. These weren't real police. Laura pulled up state laws on impersonating law enforcement. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "If they're pretending to be cops, there's no telling what else they'd do." The next day, during a work meeting, my phone buzzed. "It was Laura. They're in our backyard," she whispered. "3 of them. They jumped the fence." I stepped outside to answer. Her voice was trembling. "Ma'am, exit the garden now," a man barked in the background. "We have authorization to remove you by force." "I live here," Laura said firmly. "Show me your real police badges or leave." Then came the line that made my stomach drop. "Unit 2, subject is non-compliant, requesting K-9 backup." I was already in my car. Through the phone I heard Karen's voice. "Your garden violates HOA aesthetics. My team has full authority." "I live here," Laura shouted. "They are jalapenos," one man said. "Definitely not approved vegetation." "Since when do vegetables have ethnic restrictions?" Then I heard it, a dog barking. I sped down the street, phone still on speaker. "This is your final warning," Karen snapped. "Remove the garden or face enforcement." That's when Laura said it. "Barbara Thompson, Karen Matthew?" I'm recording everything. There was a pause, then a yell. "Confiscate that phone!" I heard Laura scream as someone grabbed at her. The phone hit the ground but stayed connected. I could hear boots, snarling, Karen yelling about Section 4.3, I-8. I turned the corner just as the fake K-9 unit SUV pulled up. But they had no idea who was coming behind me. My father. Chief Christopher. Real badge, real sirens, real authority. Everything was about to change. All wrong. We watched through our windows as the officers moved down the street, stopping at each house with meticulous precision. They spent extra time at the homes of residents who'd spoken up at recent HOA meetings, the David family who'd complained about discriminatory enforcement of noise regulations, and the Smiths who'd questioned the new security fee on their monthly statement. That evening, I created a private group chat with trusted neighbors. Messages started pouring in immediately. The security team had been entering backyards without permission, taking photos of children playing, and even threatening to detain someone for washing their car in their own driveway. As I compiled everyone's stories and evidence, my phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "Your continued surveillance of our security team is a violation of HOA policy. Expect enforcement action tomorrow." The threat was clear, but she'd made a crucial mistake. In trying to intimidate us, she confirmed what we suspected. These men weren't real police officers. I looked at Laura, who was already pulling up the state's laws about impersonating law enforcement. "We need to be really careful," she whispered. "If they're willing to pretend to be cops, who knows what else they're willing to do?" The growing stack of evidence on our kitchen table suggested we'd only scratched the surface of what was really going on in our neighborhood. My phone buzzed during a crucial work meeting. Laura's name flashed on the screen. "She never calls during work hours." Something was wrong. I stepped out, hands already sweating as I answered. "They're in our backyard," Laura whispered, her voice trembling. "3 of them. They jumped our fence while I was picking tomatoes." I heard male voices in the background, angry and demanding. Laura's breathing got faster. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Exit the garden now," one of them barked. The voice was trying to sound official, but there was something off about it. "We have authorization to remove you by force." "I'm not leaving my own property," Laura said firmly, though I could hear the fear in her voice. "Show me your real police badges or leave now." The sound of a radio crackling made my stomach drop. "Unit 2, subject is non-compliant, requesting K-9 backup at 1242 Maple Drive." I was already running to my car, my tie whipping in the wind. "Laura, I'm on my way. Don't move. Call 911 right now. These aren't real cops." Through the phone, I heard Karen's shrill voice. "Mrs. Williams, your garden is a direct violation of HOA aesthetic guidelines, section 4.3. My security team has full authority to remove unauthorized plantings and trespassers." "Trespassers?" Laura's voice rose in disbelief. "I live here, and those tomato plants are in our backyard." I put the phone on speaker as I sped home, breaking every speed limit. Laura kept the line open. Each sound made my heart race faster. The click of a weapon being unfastened. Heavy footsteps approaching. Karen's smug voice listing violations. "Look what I found," one of the security men said. "Hispanic ape peppers, definitely not approved vegetation." "They're jalapenos," Laura shouted. "Since when do vegetables have ethnic restrictions?" I heard our garden gate creak, the one I'd installed just last weekend, more boots on gravel, someone yanking at plants. "Stop touching our property," Laura yelled. "My husband's already called the real police." Karen's laugh sent chills down my spine. "Dear, we are the police in this community. The HOA charter gives us full authority. Now step aside or my men will remove you." The sound of a dog barking in the distance made my blood run cold. They were really bringing in AI units for a vegetable garden dispute? I switched lanes aggressively, drawing angry honks. "5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes." "This is what happens when you ignore warnings," Karen said. "First the unapproved plants, then the unauthorized garden stakes, and now resisting HOA security. You people need to learn respect for authority." "You people?" Laura's voice was quiet but strong. I heard her phone camera clicking. "Please say that again, Karen. I'm recording everything." The sound of scrambling feet. Karen's sharp intake of breath. "Confiscate that phone. It's against HOA policy to record security operations," I heard Laura scream as someone grabbed at her. The phone clattered to the ground but stayed connected. Through the speaker, I heard the growing rumble of a large dog's growl, getting closer. "Karen Matthew," Laura shouted, "if that dog touches me, you'll be in handcuffs before sunset." I was 2 blocks away when I heard sirens, but they weren't coming from the direction of the local station. A black SUV with K-9 unit markings screeched to a halt in front of our house. The fake police force was escalating, but they had no idea they were about to meet a real chief of police. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I'd seen power-hungry HOA boards before, but this was something else. As I turned onto our street, I saw a crowd gathering, neighbors with phones raised, recording everything. Karen's security team had finally gone too far. My tires screeched into the driveway. What I saw made my heart stop. Laura stood, backed against our front door, gardening gloves still on, dirt smudged on her cheek. 3 men in tactical gear had formed a half circle around her. Karen stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, writing furiously. But what really made my hands shake was the German shepherd, teeth bared, pulling hard against its leash. The handler, a guy who looked barely old enough to drink, was struggling to control the dog. These weren't just rent-a-cops playing dress-up anymore. This was dangerous. "Step back inside your vehicle, sir," one of the security officers barked, trying to sound official. His hand rested on what looked like a real police belt, but something was off about the bag. I'd grown up around real police equipment thanks to Dad. This wasn't it. Karen's face lit up with that smug smile when she saw me. "Perfect timing," she sneered. "Your wife has been interfering with official HOA security operations." She waved her clipboard like it was some kind of royal decree. We've documented 17 violations, including aggressive behavior toward our officers. I took out my phone and started recording. Karen's smile faltered for just a second. Posting unauthorized recordings on social media is against HOA guidelines, she snapped. But I could hear the worry in her voice. Funny thing about those guidelines, I said, keeping my voice steady, like Dad taught me. I've read them, cover to cover. Nowhere does it mention a private police force or K-9 units. The youngest officer shifted uncomfortably, his hand dropping from his belt. Laura caught my eye. I gave her a small nod. She'd been recording too, her phone tucked into her gardening apron. We discussed this possibility after the first time these guys showed up. Our home security cameras were catching everything from 3 angles. This is your final warning, Karen declared, but her voice had lost its edge. Remove the unauthorized vegetables immediately, or we'll be forced to take additional enforcement action. The German shepherd barked, making Lara flinch. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. The dog's vest said Police K-9, a federal offense if it wasn't real. I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head, listing every law they were breaking. Karen, I said calmly, pulling up the state police department's website on my phone. Did you know impersonating law enforcement is a felony? That vest, those badges, those weapons, all separate charges. The security team exchanged nervous glances. The handler's grip tightened. The dog whined. Karen's face flushed red, but she kept scribbling on her clipboard like it was a shield. We have full authority to enforce HOA regulations, she insisted, but her voice cracked. Really? I stepped to my car and pulled out the folder I'd been building, because these are the minutes from every board meeting this year. Nowhere does it mention hiring armed security or approving a K-9 unit. I turned to the youngest officer. By the way, what's your certification number for handling that dog? The handler's face went pale. The German shepherd, sensing his anxiety, sat down. Laura, I called, eyes still on the team, grab Dad's card from my wallet. Chief Christopher might want to check these gentlemen's credentials. That's when Karen made her fatal mistake. Detain them both, she shrieked. Her clipboard clattered to the ground. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, but I managed to send one quick text. Emergency. At house, fake cops threatening Laura, K-9 involved. Help. And I knew Dad was on his way. Everything from 3 different angles. This is your final warning, Karen declared, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Remove the unauthorized vegetables immediately, or we'll be forced to take additional enforcement action. The German shepherd barked, making Laura jump. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. The dog's vest said Police K-9, a federal offense if they weren't actual law enforcement. I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head listing all the laws they were breaking. Karen, I said calmly, pulling up the state police department's website on my phone, did you know impersonating law enforcement officers is a felony? Those uniforms, that dog's vest, those fake badges, each one is a separate charge. The security team started exchanging nervous glances. The dog handler's grip on the leash tightened, his knuckles turning white. Karen's face flushed red, but she kept writing on her clipboard like it was some kind of shield. We have full authority to enforce HOA regulations, she insisted, but her voice cracked. The board approved everything. Really? I reached into my car and pulled out the folder I'd been collecting. Because I have here the minutes from every board meeting for the past year. Nowhere does it mention hiring armed security or approving K-9 units. I turned to the youngest officer. By the way, what's your certification number for handling that police dog? The handler's face went pale. The German shepherd, picking up on his anxiety, started whining. Karen's pen froze mid-sentence on her clipboard. Laura, I called out, keeping my eyes on the security team. Could you grab Dad's card from my wallet? I think he'd be very interested in seeing these gentlemen's law enforcement credentials. That's when Karen made her fatal mistake. Detain them both, she shrieked, her clipboard clattering to the ground. They're threatening HOA personnel. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, but I managed to type out a quick text to my dad. Emergency at house, fake cops threatening Laura with dog, please help. I kept my phone low, pretending to check my work schedule, while Karen ranted about our garden violating some made-up rule about aesthetic cohesion. The lead security guy kept his hand on the German Shepherd's harness, making sure we could see how eager the dog was to leap forward. Laura stood her ground, but I could see her terror. She'd been bitten by a dog as a kid and never quite got over that fear. That's exactly what these bullies were counting on. I checked my phone every few seconds, trying not to be obvious. Dad had read my message. 3 dots appeared. He was typing. My heart was racing. In 20 years as chief of police, he'd seen every kind of scam and power trip imaginable. But this was personal. Karen was getting louder, waving some kind of official-looking document in Laura's face. As per Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our Enhanced Security Protocols, could you show me where the HOA board approved these protocols? I asked calmly, cutting her off. That threw her for a loop. The security team leader, his fake badge said Mark, stepped forward. Sir, you're interfering with a sanctioned HOA operation, he growled, letting the dog pull forward just a little more. I noticed his hand was shaking slightly. These guys were amateurs playing dress-up, but that made them even more dangerous. Just then I heard it, the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Karen was too busy reading from her rule book to notice, but Mark's head snapped up. He knew that sound meant trouble. The other 2 security guys started shifting nervously. One of them touched his earpiece. Probably just for show. I doubted they could afford real radio equipment. Maybe we should, one of them started to say, but Karen whirled on him. Don't you dare back down now. I'm paying you good money to show these people who's in charge. That's when the first real police car rounded the corner, lights flashing, then another and another. The look on Karen's face was priceless as 5 patrol cars surrounded my house, cutting off any escape route. The German Shepherd, sensing the shift in power, sat down and whined. Dad stepped out of the lead car. I've never been so proud to be his son. He wasn't wearing his usual business suit. He was in full chief of police uniform, badge gleaming in the sun. He'd clearly been in a meeting when he got my text, but he didn't waste a second responding. Karen Matthew, he called out, his voice carrying that special tone that only comes from decades of real police work. I'm Chief Christopher. Would you care to explain why you have unauthorized personnel impersonating law enforcement officers on private property? Karen's face went through 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fear, anger, and finally, she looked at me, then at Dad, then back at me. The pieces clicked together in her head. The security team tried to back away, but Dad's officers had already formed a perimeter. The German Shepherd, proving it had more sense than its handlers, lay down and rolled over, tail wagging at the real police K-9 unit that had just arrived. I can explain everything, Karen stammered, but Dad held up his hand. I'm sure you can, ma'am. We'll have plenty of time for that down at the station. Right now, I'm more interested in where these gentlemen got their equipment and credentials. He turned to the fake security team. Speaking of which, those badges look remarkably similar to official police identification. That's a federal offense, gentlemen. As Dad's officers began taking statements and collecting evidence, neighbors started peeking out of their houses. Some had phones out, recording everything. Karen's little empire of fear was crumbling, and the whole community was watching it happen. I pulled Laura close, feeling her finally relax as the real police took control of the situation. Your dad, she whispered, squeezing my hand. He didn't just bring backup, he brought justice. The screech of police sirens filled our street as Dad's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Karen's smirk vanished when she saw the chief of police emblem on the door. I'll never forget how her face changed, from confident to terrified in seconds. Dad stepped out, his police uniform catching the afternoon sun. The fake security team's German Shepherd suddenly went quiet, as if it knew a real authority figure had arrived. 20 years as chief of police had given my father a presence no fake badge could match. I'd like to see your security licenses and K-9 unit certifications, Dad said calmly, his voice carrying across the front yard. The 3 security officers looked at each other, their tough guy act crumbling. The one holding the dog's leash started backing away. Karen jumped in, waving a folder of papers. We have all the necessary HOA authorizations right here, she said, her voice higher than usual. These officers are fully within their rights to enforce our community guidelines. Dad took the folder but didn't open it. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed Karen something on the screen. Interesting. he said, because according to state records, there's no licensed security company registered under your HOA's name. And that K-9 unit? The closest authorized police dog training facility hasn't certified any private security dogs in 2 years. The color drained from Karen's face. The security team leader, a tall man with a buzz cut who'd been so intimidating moments before, couldn't even look anyone in the eye. 2 real police officers approached him. "Sir," one said, "that's department-issued gear you're wearing. Mind telling us where you got it?" The handler remained silent. Sweat was visible on his forehead. More neighbors had gathered on their porches watching the scene unfold. Phones recorded every moment. Laura squeezed my hand as Dad walked over to the security team's car, shining his flashlight through the windows. "Well, what do we have here?" Dad called out. In the back seat were folders, dozens of them, pictures of families in their backyards, children playing, residents simply living their lives. My stomach turned. They'd been watching us for weeks. Karen tried to slip away during the commotion, but a young officer blocked her path. "Ma'am, impersonating law enforcement officers is a federal offense," he said. "And using an unauthorized K-9 unit to threaten civilians? That's going to require some explaining." The dog, sensing its handler's distress, had gone from aggressive to confused. A real K-9 unit arrived, and the difference was obvious. The HOA's dog had none of the discipline or training of a real police dog. Dad turned to address the growing crowd of neighbors. "If anyone has had encounters with these individuals, we'll need statements," he announced. Hands shot up across the street. The David family stepped forward first, then the Patels. One by one the truth was coming out, and Karen's kingdom was falling apart in real time. "Under your HOA's name? And that K-9 unit?" The closest authorized police dog training facility hadn't certified any private security dogs in 2 years. The color drained from Karen Matthews' face. The security team leader, a tall man with a buzz cut who'd been so intimidating moments before, now couldn't seem to look anyone in the eye. 2 real police officers approached him, and I noticed his hand trembling as he tried to keep hold of the dog's leash. "Sir," one of Dad's officers said, "that's department-issued gear you're wearing. Mind telling me where you got it?" The security team leader remained silent, sweat visible on his forehead. More neighbors had gathered on their porches, watching the scene unfold. I saw phones recording everything. Laura squeezed my hand as Dad walked over to the security team's car, shining his flashlight through the windows. "Well, what do we have here?" Dad called out. In the back seat were folders. Dozens of them, pictures of families in their backyards, children playing, residents simply living their lives. My stomach turned as I realized how long they'd been watching us all. Karen tried to slip away during the commotion, but a young officer blocked her path. "Ma'am, impersonating law enforcement officers is a federal offense," he said. "And using an unauthorized K-9 unit to threaten civilians, that's going to require some explaining." The dog, seeming to sense its handler's distress, had gone from aggressive to confused. A real K-9 unit arrived, and the difference was obvious. The HOA's dog had none of the discipline or training of a true police dog. Dad turned to address the growing crowd of neighbors. "If anyone has had encounters with these individuals, we'll need statements," he announced. Hands shot up across the street. The David family from next door stepped forward first, then the Patels from across the road. "They threatened to have my children removed by social services for playing basketball in our driveway," Mrs. David said, her voice shaking with both anger and relief. As real police officers began taking statements, I watched Karen sink into the back of a patrol car, still clutching her HOA rulebook. The security team was being cuffed, their fake badges and gear confiscated. Their German shepherd, now revealed as just an untrained dog used to scare people, was being gently led away by the real K-9 unit officer. Laura walked over to my dad, giving him a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. Dad just nodded, but I could see the anger in his eyes as he looked through more of the surveillance photos from the security team's car. A news van pulled up at the end of our street. Karen saw it through the patrol car window and finally broke down crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of someone who was finally facing consequences for their actions. Real justice was about to begin, and our peaceful community would never be the same. As I watched more neighbors come forward to share their stories, I realized this was bigger than just our house or our garden. This was about standing up to bullies who hide behind fake authority and made-up rules. The morning after the arrests, my dad called me into his office at the police station. Spread across his desk were stacks of papers. HOA financial records, security contracts, and hundreds of photos taken of our neighbors. My stomach turned as I saw pictures of children playing, families having dinner on their patios, and timestamps showing round-the-clock surveillance. "Son, this goes deeper than we thought," Dad said, sliding a document toward me. It was a bank statement showing monthly payments of $115,000 to a company called Community Guardian Services. The real HOA budget only allowed for $2,000 in security expenses. Where was the extra money coming from? I helped Dad dig through more records. Karen had been charging special assessment fees to families who received violation notices. The more we looked, the worse it got. The David family had paid $3,000 in security deposits after their birthday party incident. The Patels were charged extra maintenance fees for their vegetable garden. The fake security team's background checks revealed even more shocking details. None of them had real law enforcement training. Their leader, Robert, had been fired from 3 different police departments for excessive force. The K-9 unit? It wasn't even a trained police dog, it was Robert's personal pet, used to intimidate residents. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. She'd been talking to Mrs. Patel, who had shared videos of the security team rifling through her mailbox last month. Other neighbors started sending evidence too: ring doorbell footage, cell phone videos, written threats from Karen. Each piece of evidence made my blood boil more. Dad's detective, Lisa Martinez, burst into the office waving a document. "Chief, we found their training manual." The pages detailed how to target specific residents, what times to photograph families, and even scripts for threatening people who questioned their authority. Karen's handwritten notes in the margins made it clear this wasn't about security, it was about control. The investigation revealed that Karen had a history of power abuse. She'd run similar schemes in 2 other communities before moving here. Both times she'd left just as people started asking questions about missing funds. This time, she hadn't counted on messing with a police chief's family. By afternoon, reporters gathered outside the station. Dad handled the press conference while I helped Detective Martinez organize evidence for the district attorney. That's when we found the encrypted emails. Karen had been sharing our neighbors' personal information with outside companies, selling data about their daily routines and vulnerabilities. The real HOA board members were shocked. They'd trusted Karen to handle day-to-day operations and had no idea about the fake security force or the missing money. One board member broke down crying when she realized she'd signed blank checks that Karen had used to fund her scheme. As evening approached, more residents came forward. The security team had been demanding cash payments to overlook violations. They'd threatened elderly residents with eviction, photographed teenage girls by the community pool, and followed kids walking home from school. Each story hit harder than the last. I sat in Dad's office until midnight, helping sort through the evidence. The last document we found was a draft of Karen's newest plan, installing cameras inside people's homes for proper compliance monitoring. She'd already ordered the equipment, using HOA funds. Just as we were getting ready to leave, Dad's phone rang. The FBI wanted to take over the case. Karen's operation wasn't just in our community. She had links to similar schemes across 3 states. What started as a simple HOA power trip had uncovered a nationwide criminal enterprise targeting neighborhoods. Looking at the mountain of evidence on Dad's desk, I thought about Laura in our garden, the Patels tending their vegetables, and all our neighbors who'd lived in fear. Karen hadn't just broken the law. She'd broken our community's trust. But as I read through more resident statements, I realized something else. By working together to stop her, our community had found its strength again. The neighborhood had grown stronger than ever. "There's something you need to see," my neighbor Tom whispered, pulling out his phone. My stomach dropped as I watched shaky footage of Karen Matthews' security team surrounding the David family's birthday party last month. In the video, kids were crying as the K-9 unit circled their bounce house while Karen stood in the background with a satisfied smirk. More neighbors started gathering on our lawn, each bringing their own evidence. Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old widow, showed us photos of security guards peering through her windows at night, claiming they were checking for unauthorized decorations. Her hands shook as she described being too scared to even water her flowers. The Patels brought out a detailed diary of harassment, daily photographs, fake violations, and even threats about their suspicious vegetable garden. They said growing too many tomatoes could be a code violation, Mr. Patel explained, his voice tight with anger. We've lived here for 20 years, but last month they started calling our curry cooking a public nuisance. My dad's officers moved through the crowd, taking statements and collecting evidence. With each new story, Karen seemed to physically shrink, her face growing paler. The security team stood handcuffed by the patrol cars, their fake badges and real weapons laid out on the hood for photos. Someone had started a group chat, sharing photos and videos of Karen's reign of terror. The Kevin family had footage of the security team measuring their grass with rulers at 6 a.m. The Kowalskis shared emails where Karen threatened to put liens on their house for having a basketball hoop, one that had been there for 15 years. Look at this, Dad said, showing me a document on his laptop. Karen had been paying the security team from a secret HOA account, one hidden from the board in yearly audits. The amount made my eyes widen, over $200,000 in just 6 months. No wonder our community pool hadn't been repaired. A news van pulled up, attracted by all the patrol cars. Karen tried to hide her face, but her distinctive red power suit made her easy to spot. As the reporter started interviewing neighbors, more people drove in from nearby streets. Turns out Karen's security team had been harassing people well beyond our HOA's boundaries. The Martinez family from 2 blocks over brought security camera footage of the team trying to issue them citations, even though they weren't even part of our HOA. The team had flashed badges and threatened to arrest their teenage son for suspicious skateboarding. My dad pulled me aside, his face serious. This goes deeper than we thought, he said quietly. These guys have warrants in 3 counties for similar scams. They target communities with power-hungry HOA presidents. Convince them they need special security, then use that authority to case houses for robberies. As the sun started setting, our street looked like a block party, if block parties had police evidence technicians and news reporters. Neighbors who had never spoken were hugging and crying together. Laura brought out cold drinks for everyone, and the David kids were finally able to finish their interrupted birthday party, this time with real police officers singing along. Karen sat alone in the back of a patrol car, watching as her carefully constructed kingdom. Her phone kept buzzing, probably the real HOA board members seeing themselves on the evening news. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and investigations, but tonight, for the first time in years, our neighborhood felt like a real community again. Looking around at all the smiling faces and shared stories, I realized Karen's biggest crime wasn't just the fraud or the fake security force, it was stealing our trust in each other. As Dad always said, real security doesn't come from badges and uniforms, it comes from neighbors who look out for one another. My hands shook as I watched the real police officers put handcuffs on Karen. Her face turned from its usual angry red to ghost white when they read her rights. The fake security team tried to run, but Dad's officers had already blocked every exit from our neighborhood. One of them even tried to hide in Mrs. Patterson's rose bushes. That didn't end well for anyone, especially the roses. The next morning our street was packed with news vans. Reporters couldn't believe that an HOA president had created her own illegal police force. My phone kept buzzing with messages from friends sharing links to the story. Local HOA president arrested for running fake police operation was trending on every local news website. Dad called a community meeting at the police station. One by one, our neighbors stood up to tell their stories. The David family showed videos of the fake officers threatening their kids for playing basketball after 6 p.m. The Patels shared photos of the security team writing fake tickets for their non-regulation mailbox height. Each story made the charges against Karen more serious. But the biggest shock came when the police forensic accountant presented his findings. Karen hadn't just hired illegal security, she'd stolen over $200,000 from our HOA funds to pay for her private army. The money that should have gone to fixing the community pool and maintaining the playground had instead bought tactical gear. And that poor German shepherd, speaking of the dog, we all got misty-eyed when the real K-9 unit officer told us how they'd rescued him. He'd been mistreated and poorly trained. Now he was going to a special program to be rehabilitated and maybe even become a real police dog someday. Dad let me visit him at the training center last week. He's already so much happier. The district attorney came to our next HOA meeting. She explained all the charges Karen and her fake officers were facing: impersonating law enforcement, fraud, theft, intimidation, and civil rights violations. Some of the neighbors gasped when she said Karen could face up to 15 years in prison. I caught myself feeling a little sorry for her, until I remembered how she'd made Laura cry. Then something amazing happened. People started sharing their old violation notices, hundreds of them. We spread them out on tables in the community center and a pattern emerged. Karen had targeted specific families more than others, especially people of color and anyone who'd ever questioned her authority. The DA's eyes lit up when she saw the evidence of discrimination. The local newspaper ran a big story about how communities can protect themselves from HOA abuse. They interviewed Dad about the warning signs of fake security forces. Laura got quoted about the importance of standing up to bullies, no matter what titles they give themselves. The reporter even mentioned our vegetable garden, the one that started this whole mess, as an example of reasonable homeowner rights. Last night, we had our first HOA board election since Karen's arrest. The meeting room was packed. Even people who'd never come before showed up to vote. No one talked about lawn height regulations or mailbox colors anymore. Instead of colors and compliance codes, everyone discussed real ideas for community improvement, ways to make our neighborhood more welcoming, inclusive, and connected. The new board's first unanimous vote? A resident's Bill of Rights. No more surprise inspections, no more harassment, and absolutely no more fake security forces. As I watched my neighbors line up to sign the document, I noticed something had shifted. People weren't afraid anymore. They were talking, laughing, making plans for block parties and community projects. The energy was electric. Karen Matthews' lawyer had tried to cut a plea deal, but the evidence was too strong. The district attorney said our neighborhood had set an example for the entire state. New legislation was already being proposed to curb HOA overreach and protect homeowners' rights. Laura was even invited to testify at the state capitol, sharing our story firsthand. As we left the courthouse after Karen's guilty plea, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "You know what the best kind of justice is?" he asked. "The kind that brings people together instead of tearing them apart." Looking at our neighbors embracing on the courthouse steps, many with tears in their eyes, I nodded. I couldn't agree more. The moving trucks came for Karen on a misty Monday morning. I watched from our porch as she oversaw the careful packing of her beloved lawn ornaments, the same ones she'd once weaponized to issue countless violations. Her face had aged 10 years since her arrest, and her once commanding posture had collapsed into something small and uncertain. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former HOA president pleads guilty in private security scandal. The story had caught national attention. Investigations into similar HOA abuses had already begun across the country. Dad told me he'd received calls from police chiefs in 3 different states asking for advice. Laura stepped onto the porch with 2 steaming cups of coffee and handed me one. "Remember when we were afraid to even drink this out here?" she asked with a smile. She was right. Just a year ago, Karen's fake security team would have cited us for loitering on our own property. Now, in place of her ornamental lawn, our community garden thrived. Mrs. Patterson, who once reported neighbors for ethnic cooking smells, now traded her tomatoes for Mrs. Patel's homemade curry paste. The David kids, who used to dart indoors any time a security truck passed, now proudly taught others how to grow the best jalapenos. Every Sunday, Dad stopped by, not as Chief Christopher anymore, but as a proud father and soon-to-be grandfather. Laura's baby bump was just starting to show, and the idea of raising our child in this new version of our neighborhood filled me with gratitude. The same neighbors who once avoided each other out of fear now brought us baby clothes, parenting books, and casserole recipes. Our new homeowners council held meetings in the very community center where Karen's infamous wall of shame, once covered in violation notices, had been replaced with cheerful photos from neighborhood events. Laura, now council president, led her first meeting with a revolutionary proposal: to redirect our HOA budget toward community enrichment programs instead of surveillance and enforcement. The vote passed unanimously. Last week, a documentary crew came to interview us. They filmed our monthly block party where Officer Rodriguez, a real police officer, played basketball with the kids while parents grilled burgers and shared stories. The producer couldn't believe it was the same neighborhood she'd read about in national headlines. Karen's old security office, it had been transformed into a community resource center. The shelves that once held tactical gear now displayed books, board games, and coffee mugs. The only uniforms worn inside belonged to our community service volunteers, easily recognized by their bright yellow neighbor helper vests. Yesterday I found an envelope in our mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter from Karen's daughter. She'd moved her mother to a smaller home in another state. "Mum's started therapy," she wrote. "Watching your community heal helped her realize she needs to heal too." Enclosed was a photo of Karen, smiling sincerely for the first time in years, tending to a small garden at her new home. Standing on our front porch, watching new families move into homes once filled with tension, I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything good about community living. Laura gently squeezed my hand as we watched kids from every background playing freely in front yards. There were no security cars in sight. The only sirens we heard now belonged to the ice cream truck. And the only person making neighborhood rounds was Mrs. Patel, delivering her famous homemade naan to new families. Our story had made the cover of Community Living magazine. The headline read, "From Fear to Family: How One Neighborhood Overthrew Tyranny and Found True Security Through Unity." But the real story wasn't in the article. It was in the sound of laughter from the community garden, the aroma of multicultural potluck dinners, the sight of neighbors helping each other, no badges required. Dad says it best when new residents ask about our security system. He smiles and answers, "The best security isn't cameras or guards, it's knowing and caring about the people who live next door." As the sun set over our transformed community, I realized Karen's biggest fear had come true. She lost control. But in losing control, we all found something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to be neighbors in the truest sense of the word. When I discovered our HOA president had hired a fake police force with K-9 units to terrorize residents over vegetable gardens and lawn decor, I thought it was a bad joke, but it wasn't. It was a full-blown power trip disguised as community enforcement, and when my dad, Chief Christopher, uncovered the truth, it didn't just expose a corrupt HOA, it sparked a movement. Here's the lesson: never underestimate the power of informed neighbors. If something feels off in your community, document it. Ask questions. Know your rights. Bullies thrive on silence and confusion. But when we came together, we didn't just take back our street. We built something better. In today's world, abuse of authority doesn't always wear a uniform. It can come with clipboards, fancy titles, and fake regulations. But real power, that comes from unity, truth, and neighbors who stand up for each other. Want more stories like this? Want to learn how to spot the red flags and protect your neighborhood from HOA overreach? Hit that follow and subscribe to the HOA Revenge YouTube channel. Join the fight, share your story, take your power back, because real security doesn't come from a badge, it comes from you.